Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games, back with another cool pinball repair video for you this evening. We are working on an old Bally $6 million man pinball machine. This thing's cool. Somebody brought it by and wanted us to work on it. It's in pretty decent shape. The cabinet's a little worn, but the playfield's nice. The back glass is nearly perfect, and the game actually runs. So in the first video, if you didn't see that, we went over the condition that it was in when it came in. It actually still played a little bit. We messed around with it a little bit. The ball was stuck in it. And we're now going to work through it and do some preventative maintenance stuff. So the first thing that we're going to do is pull out the power supply in the bottom right-hand corner of the back box and mess with it. Now again, it works. So we're just doing kind of preventative maintenance stuff, touch up some things, get it working a little better, hopefully. So we're going to do that first. So let me get a screwdriver. We'll pull that power supply out and put it on the bench and then start going through it. Okay, folks, so here is the power supply. First thing we're going to mess with, because we're basically following the power into the game and then going through. Now this one's already working, so there's not too much to do, but we're going to do a little bit of preventative maintenance. So it looks like a very clean original one that doesn't look like it's ever had anything done to it. So we're just going to do a few things to it and move right on. Now there's upgrades and stuff you can do if you want to, but the thing's working. I'm not going to do too much. Should I do too much with it working, Joey?
No.
Joey says no. So the things you got to look at are the wrong fuses in there. That could be a problem. So you wanna make sure the right value fuses are in each thing. On this particular power supply, it's labeled on the board behind the fuse. And then these connectors here, these legs, you want to clean if they're corroded. Sometimes they'll even look burnt. You can consider replacing them too if you want, if they're really burnt up. But a lot of times you can just clean off the pins, get them nice and shiny again, and that's your main things on the front. We're going to take these 3 screws out, which will allow us to take this board actually off of this metal mount here, and then look at the back of it, because a lot of times you have bad solder joints on these pins that we're going to resolder. The transformer itself, usually you don't have to do a thing to. You might want to clean it off a little bit if it's real dusty or something, just to make it look better. This is actually a really clean looking one. So there's not much here to do. But we're just trying to get it a little more reliable. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take those screws off and we'll look at the back of it and see what the solder looks like. Okay, so I took the screws out, I've turned it upside down, and we are looking for bad solder joints. Now we're going to resolder them anyways. But just for giggles, I figured I'd see if I could see any. Because, you know, this thing's in nice shape. So, I don't know if it's got any bad solder joints or not. It all looks a little rough, but nothing. It's not horrible. Oh, it fell. I don't necessarily see any that are, you know, on the verge of failing. Usually they're much worse than this, which is just more of a testament that this is a pretty good game. Pretty nice condition, actually. But we'll resolder them anyway. So we're going to reflow new solder on every one of these pins, just to mix it back up really good. Heat that back up and get it to flow again, and put a little bit of new solder in there too. Now you don't want to go crazy where there's big old balls of solder that short out to the pin next to it or anything. And you'll notice that a lot of them are shorted out anyway because they're soldered to the same trace. But this is a very clean game. Now these are the bridge rectifiers, and they're a little bit small. They don't really even, well, they probably still make them that size, but some people will upgrade it by changing all that out and everything. The way I see it, if the thing ain't broke, I leave them. Now, if one's burnt up, I put a new one in. But all of these seem to be working. If you caught our first video, So I'm not the type to replace things that there is the small chance might fail in the near future, right? And you can also resolder all of these connections where the wires come through from the transformer if you want, but usually they're in pretty good shape and they don't need it. And there's just not much to these rectifier boards. You've got the two big resistors. They hardly ever fail. Sometimes they'll be physically damaged, though, where one's chipped or something, so you might want to replace them then. And then over here you've got these 4 diodes that from time to time one of them will go bad. But my understanding is just me, at least how in practice, how it is with me. I don't replace stuff that hasn't failed because I don't think they wear. Like a diode, so those diodes are 42 years old, but if you put a new one in, I don't think that it's any less likely to short than these old ones. That's just my understanding of it. Usually something traumatic happens to make it short. I mean, I guess you'd have to assume that the older it is, the more likely it is to short, but you know, if we start going by that kind of rationale, we could replace every damn thing in the game, and I'm not going to do that, so... we're kind of, we're in a situation where this is a nice, clean, original one. I'm just going to resolder these pins, then that's the preventative maintenance. Because the solder will break eventually, and it gets a little worse and worse over time. Every time you pull the pins loose, the connectors loose, the ones especially on the corners, get stressed and break apart from time to time. So we're going to reflow that just so we don't have to worry about it down the road. We're going to clean up the pins, but as you can see, they're still nice and shiny and everything. And we're going to check these fuses. So let me do the solder on the back so I can go ahead and put it back down, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I got new solder on there. Sometimes whenever you're adding the solder, you'll see a solder joint open up. You'll see a ring form right around the thing as you're doing it. That proves to you there was a cracked solder joint. None of these did that. They all came out just fine. So, like I said, preventative maintenance. And I've had people say, why don't you show yourself doing the soldering? Well, I'd have to set up the tripod and all that crap, for one. And then two, my channel's not about doing technical stuff. I know people may think that, but I have no intention of acting like, you know, I'm some technical guy or I know the best way to do it and all that. I'm more about the gist of it, you know, because I want people that are amateurs to feel like they have for lack of a better term, the balls to do it, you know. So if you see one of these games that needs work doing and you're an amateur, if you take a systematic approach and work through it, you don't have to be a pro, you don't have to be really technical. You can work your way through it and fix it, even if you're not the best at soldering, even if you're not super knowledgeable in all the terms, because I'm not, you know. So I like doing the videos where we're showing off the game itself, which is cool. It's from 1978, you know. I like showing off the game itself, and I like showing off the steps that I take to fix things, but I'm not so hung up on what type of solder to use. Here, this is what I just used, so. But see, when I show this, I'll get a bunch of people saying, "Oh, that's not the proper type." Blah 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 blah. It's just irrelevant to me, you know. I mean, do the best you can. If you want to see a video on how to solder, there are lots of people on YouTube that can show you the absolute best way to solder, much better than me. But here's what I used. I bought this stuff at the flea market. I had a guy I know, the guy that sold me all the GameCube games that were broke. He goes to the flea market every week. He also found a bunch of solder and brought it over. From time to time, he'll pop up with some solder. So this is what I've been using lately, until we get rid of all this, and then we'll move on. So that's what we're doing it with. I'm sure this is the wrong stuff. Oh, I'm positive. It's too thin and too thick. It's the absolute wrong mixture, right? It doesn't have enough of this or has too much of that. It's old, which is bad. The new stuff is also bad. I didn't use the right temperature. I didn't use the right hand. I'm left-handed. You know what I mean? So I'm not the guy to watch for tips on how to solder. I'm just saying a tip that you might find helpful for an old pinball machine is to resolder these connections. Okay, so that's what we've done. So I'm going to lay this back down and we're going to look at the front and we're going to check out those fuses. make sure we got the right fuses in them, because that is very important. You got to be very specific about the fuses. So let me lay that down and screw it back in, and we'll check out the fuses. Okay, one thing you're going to run into from time to time is these fuse holders. On these Bally's, they're pretty good, but you'll get a situation where, see how they're, I guess, brass or whatever, and then you get one that's tin or silver plated or something, and it gets all tarnished. And that tarnish will actually keep the fuse from working. So, you know, the way a fuse works, it's creating power, so the transformer sends it up, it goes through the bridge rectifiers, and it goes through a fuse, or it might go the other way, or whatever, but it goes through the fuse, and power comes from this side to that side. And if something shorts, it draws so much amperage through the fuse that it blows the fuse. But what happens is, if it's not holding the fuse good on both ends, the power can't get through. So it's as if there's no fuse, or the fuse is blown. Or even worse, it causes a bunch of resistance, which starts burning things up. And so you get big burn marks on the playfield and stuff. I mean, on the PCB and stuff. So you kind of want to clean that up a little bit if it's tarnished. So the way I do it, I just hit it with a little bit of light sandpaper. Sometimes when it's down inside of something like that, it's a little harder. We had this fiberglass brush. Was it Neil? I think his name's Neil. Mr. Neil sent us. You can clean it up with that a little bit. You can use a chemical if that's the thing you want to do, but I don't really like using chemicals that much because it just gets all over everything else, you know. So I like doing something a little more in place. So you need to clean them up a little bit. And then there's a guy local here to us that whenever he sells arcade games, he mentions some of the things that he's done to them. And he mentions that he retensions the fuse holders. Retensions the fuse holder. So I'm going to show you how to retension a fuse holder. That one has been retensioned. You don't see it on these Bally's as much, but different companies use different brands, I guess, of these little fuse holders. Some are cheaper, some are better. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, so these might be a different size, but depending on where you get them, you can buy these little things. Like this is for the smaller ones. You can buy these things, and here's the bigger ones, and some of them are made cheaper. Like these are probably cheaper than the original ones. So sometimes they'll get real weak and they'll break apart. So like on a Pac-Man, the ones Bally was using for Pac-Man fall apart. Same exact company at about the same time was making these, and these usually don't break. I've had very few of them break over the years. But sometimes they'll be a little loose where the fuse is loose in there, where it's just barely grabbing it. And so if it is, you need to retension the fuse holder. And then you can brag about it when you sell the game. So we're going to do that if any of them are loose. We're also going to clean them a little bit so that you get good metal to metal contact on the fuse. And then we're going to check all these fuses and see if they're all the right value. Because if one is overfused, it can cause you a bunch of problems. So hopefully not, but let me clean it up a little bit and then we'll see what it looks like. All right, so cleaned it up a little bit. The little fiberglass brush cleaned it right up. And all of the fuses were the correct value. I am so impressed. Whoever owned this, they may be the original fuses actually, but whoever owned this had the right ones in every location. Just giving me more reason to say this is a very nice condition machine. So we're pretty much, you can check the bridge rectifiers while you have it out, but the thing is, if the fuses are proper, if one of these bridges is bad, it'll blow a fuse. Sometimes you have a problem where the bridge will fail open, but they're basically diodes in there, you know, they work like diodes. And usually diodes don't fail like that. Usually they fail by shorting. And if they do fail open, it doesn't hurt anything. I guess it could, depending on how the circuit is, but in this situation it won't. You'll just have a voltage missing. And since the game was up and running, I think all these are fine. So we've cleaned it up. Basically all we did was just clean the connections, resolder the back pins, take a look at it. Everything looks cool. So now we know that the power supply is solid for the guy. He shouldn't have any problems pop up in the future, unless it's something like a coil shorts on the playfield and burns up something or whatever. But this shouldn't fail in any way that we can see coming. So we're going to put this back in. We probably spent 20-25 minutes messing with it. So it's not a real expensive thing, but just, you know, we're just trying to get a check everything out for the guy and make sure that everything's in good shape. So when the voltage leaves here, some of it heads up to the solenoid driver board up in the top right-hand corner of the back box, and it does some power supply stuff too. So these kind of all work in conjunction. You have the line voltage comes in, the transformer splits it up, the rectifier board rectifies some of it with the bridges, right, and fuses everything. And then a couple of the voltages run up to the back box, to the solenoid board, which is the display voltage that gets regulated, and then the 12 volt, which gets regulated to 5 volts. So there's 2 sections on the solenoid board to do that. So we're going to do it next. So I'll go pop this back in, screw it back in, and we'll grab that solenoid board. All right, got it all mounted back in there. Now, usually on these, you have to repin these connectors. So that there's 3 little connectors that go here, and you'll get some of the pins, like especially these last 2 on this long one, get all burned up. And if you look at these, you can see that the pins do look a little oxidized. But if you look inside, they're still nice and clean. So, you know, I'm fixing it for a guy, and if the thing is actually up and working, it's hard for me to like charge him to replace stuff that doesn't really need replaced, you know. If I thought they were screwed up, I would, and usually they are. Like if they were burnt and that little connector was messed up or something, I'd swap them, but they're working and they're not messed up, so I kind of got to leave them. And you know, I really wanted to repin all those connectors. This little shield goes on there to keep you from accidentally touching something and getting shocked. So I kind of just want to turn it back on just to make sure that we haven't broken anything while we were playing our little game. See, like, I don't see any lights. Display's still doing about what they were doing. Didn't we have lights before? Have I unhooked something that's giving us light problems? So stuff like that. We had some attract lights before. Yeah, so see, we've got the back box lights blinking, but the playfield ones are not. So that's probably a bad connection on one of those connectors. Let me go look at that. Okay, so this is the playfield connector. I just wiggled it and the lights came back. So what would cause that? That pin needs repin, so I probably will repin that connector. To get it a little more reliable in case that happens to him at his house. But it's no big deal, won't take long. So after we do that, we're going to mess with this solenoid driver board, so we'll pull it out too and take it in the back, and it needs a couple little preventative maintenance updates to it, and that's also where the display voltage comes from. You can see we've got some, well, they look fine on that test, but you can see we've got some display issues that we're going to be working with. So coming up. Don't let them blind you now. Don't let it hurt your eyes. Those nice new pins. Some of the old ones were trifuricon. Gung, gung, gung. So they hit the metal, the post on 3 sides. Makes a better connection. And some of them were like this, so somebody must have replaced some of them at some point. These are the original ones. The trifuricon ones, somebody would have added. What happened to my finger? I bet I did that in Jefferson. They all look pretty good, so it was probably something that you could have just wiggled the wire like I did. It probably didn't need to be replaced, but hey, we replaced them anyway. Let me move all this crap. Let's see if that made it better. More like the bueno. I talked about the battery on the last video, and I'll talk about it on the next video. But this is a battery-free video, people. Alright, so that looks like it's making a solid connection again. We're getting there with them all acting weird. But it doesn't appear that we've done any harm. It's still working. And we've updated the power supply a little bit, and now we're moving up to the solenoid board, which is the next chain in the link. Link in the chain, I mean. There's a chain, and this is one of the links in it. It's the next one. So I'll pull that out with a simple screwdriver, and you unplug it, power off, and we'll take it in the back and look at it. Okay, so here is the solenoid driver board. So power comes up, and it comes into this connector. Some of the power. And there is a 12-volt voltage that comes from that rectifier board that comes to here, in this area, turns it into a regulated 5 volts. And it's not an adjustable 5 volts, it's just regulated. So it'll be a little high, usually it's 5.2, 5.1, which is good because there'll be a little bit of resistance in the wires and the connections and stuff. So you want it to have 5 or a little over 5 at the main board. If you've got a little less than 5, that's cool too, but if you're at 4.8, you might have some problems. Okay, and then this area, I'm not counting this, there's a big cap up here. This area takes the display voltage and regulates it. And there is a little, through this hole, there is a little potentiometer here that you can turn one way or the other to raise and lower the voltage. So it comes from the rectifier board at like 250 volts, 260 volts, something like that. And the displays want 190 volts. That's the official number from back in the day. But what most people do is they run it a little lower because you literally wear those glasses out eventually. So if you can get it to run on 175, something like that, and they will, 175, that's a little better. So you can adjust that wheel to turn it down a little bit. And they'll still look the same. They might be a little bit too less bright. Somebody was commenting on one of the videos that the only drawback they could really see is that when you lower the voltage, I think they said that would increase the current or whatever. And so there's a negligible risk there with that, but they were saying that they thought that it wouldn't really be that big of an issue. And it's kind of a thing that people have been doing for a long time, so it's kind of an accepted practice. So if you can lower the voltage a little bit, you don't really want it at you don't really want it at 190. You want it down at like 175, maybe a little bit lower, just to make the glasses last longer if you have original glasses. The ones on this game all look pretty good, but some of them aren't working, which is probably a problem on the actual display. Probably a connection problem. One thing though, this area up here, there are a couple little transistors, and whenever one of those goes bad, unfortunately, what happens is it no longer regulates the voltage. So it sends 260 volts out to all the displays. And it will keep working like that. And you can't really even tell. So it wasn't the greatest design. So it will send 260 volts out the displays and burn those suckers up. And they'll start getting little pinhole burn marks on the actual display, and it just ends up looking like crap. So it was actually kind of common too. The thing would short, send out the full 260, and burn up the displays. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to very simply resolder the connectors like we did on the other one, the solder on the back. We did the solenoid test in the last video, so we pretty much know all of these solenoid transistors are fine because they all worked fine. Oh yeah, this part of the board, this connector here comes from the MPU, and there's some other connections on it too, but basically it feeds this chip, which drives all of these solenoid transistors. They're tip 122s, and whenever you replace them, you replace it with a TIP 102, which is a little beefier. So that's what all of these are. And there's a little diode and a resistor and a capacitor on each one, you know, to make it work properly. Give you an idea of what we're working with here. It's a 74L154. But it appears all of that's working fine. This is usually a really simple section of the board. If you have a problem, usually it's one of these TIPs that burn up or locked on or something. Very simple to replace. Replace it with a TIP 102. Sometimes you get a problem with one of these. Every once in a while this thing's bad, but not very often. It's almost always just a transistor. So we're going to do that. We're also going to replace this capacitor. This is the filter capacitor for the 5 volts. And it's old, so it's time to give it a little upgrade. This capacitor up here is the filter capacitor for the voltage to the displays. Sometimes this thing will have problems and you'll get flickering and stuff on the displays like we have now, but I believe what we have now is going to be connection problems and problems on the actual displays themselves. This capacitor hardly ever needs to be changed. And I've had people say before that the big blue sprags are pretty decent. So I don't know if that's a sprag or not. It kind of looks like it. And you know, you can get an ESR meter and stuff and check it to see what you think. But this 5-volt one is always pretty much out of spec, so it's got to go. It's got to go. I'm tired of looking at it already, and I just started looking at it. So we're going to do that. We're also going to do a little mod where we tie test point 1 and test point 3 together with a little jumper wire on the back. Basically, this is the test point for the 5 volts that goes out to the MPU. It also goes out on a little jumper wire that comes back in to go to feed these 4 chips so that they have a 5-volt source. But since it's on board, we just put a little jumper on it so that it doesn't have to go through the loop and back on. You might have a problem where if one of these loses its 5 volts, it might make a solenoid lock on. I don't know if the design is that it would lock on or they would lock off, but so we do a little jumper there. And then also, if you do have the flickering displays, sometimes it's because this cap isn't getting a good ground. So that's crazy. I mean, I think that's the factory cap. I don't think that's been replaced. So that's the factory solder job there. Wow, I've never seen one like that. So that is a ground, and that is a ground. So I don't know why they did that, but the ground runs off the board on a pin to get grounded somewhere else. So hell, we just put a little jumper. Ground that sucker. Now on these, there's a bunch of different versions of this board with different silk screens. Some of them are even hand-drawn. You can see that it's the old school. You can just tell that it was drawn by hand whenever they did it. So we're going to put a little jumper from there to there. We're also going to put a jumper on the ground. Oh, well, nope, we're not on this one. So this is ground as well. Sometimes they have a really thin trace here. But it's kind of the same thing. The ground for that cap is only going to 1 pin. So it'd be better if it was tied in with the ground that's going to everything else. So, you know, now that I look at it, this ground here isn't tied into anything. It's just tied into the ground on the back box. So just slightly different design. So if you didn't have your mounting screw in it, connecting it to the back box, and then mounting screws in the other things like the MPU and stuff, it wouldn't be of much use. Let's see if we've got bad solder on any of these. That first one there is a little questionable, but it looks pretty good. These first two aren't the greatest. This top one up here, can't really see it that good. It's not the greatest. And then that second one there is definitely broke, but you can't see it. Those definitely need resoldered. Yeah, there you go. See the second one from the right? See the crack in it and the solder around the post? Okay, so those need resoldered. Put our little jumper. Probably won't worry about this one. Usually there's a bit more fat, like a big fat trace that runs right along through the bottom here, and you can just easily jumper it over, but on this board it doesn't have it. So we'll resolder our connectors, put that one jumper, put the jumper for the test point 1 to test point 3, and then replace this capacitor, and that should get us going. Okay, so we got our new capacitor on there. Now the one that was on it, it's a General Electric, kind of neat capacitor actually. It was 11,700 UF. "20-volt DC, 24-volt surge." That's pretty cool. I wonder if they label them like that anymore, where they tell you the surge voltage and the voltage that it's supposed to run at. 85 degrees Celsius max ambient. See, this stuff too. People will say, "Oh, you should replace that with 105." I mean, we're talking Celsius here, aren't we? 85 degrees Celsius, that's really hot. If it can survive that, that's pretty good. Made in the USA. That's pretty rare. You won't find one that says that anymore. And then it says 7722, which usually they use, on a lot of these, they used a four-number date code. So that was probably, this was probably made in the 22nd week of 1977. Which makes sense. This board is probably from 77 or 78. So it's been on there a long time. It may still be fine. I don't know. I didn't test it. We went with a new one. So we bumped it up just a little bit. We made it 15,000 microfarad, just so that it has a little bit more filtering power. But I've heard you don't want to go too high. Like if you go too crazy, it causes issues. So we didn't go too crazy. We just bumped it up a little bit. Hopefully that'll help filter it a little better. And it's 25 volts. And I turned it, twisted it just a little bit so that you can read it at a glance, so that the next repair person, like Sylvester would say, the next repair person will be able to tell at a glance what it is. Okay, and on the back, since they left that cap leg so long, I was able to just bend it over, resoldered everything. Look how great. Boy, I get people complaining and saying I can't solder all the time, though, so I'm sure that won't be up to standards. But it's up to my standards. So I'm confident there's no more cold solder joints. I'm going to put our little jumper from test point 1 to test point 3. Didn't do anything to the display section, though. But what we're going to do is, you could make the argument that you want to replace that potentiometer. It depends, you know. So we're going to put it in, and I'm going to adjust that and try to get the voltage to about 175 and test it just to make sure that the voltage isn't something crazy high. Now, I don't know if this is one of the ones with 2 test points. Yes. So if you look under there, test point 2 and test point 4. So one of them is the voltage coming in, and one of them is the voltage going out. This is one of the early ones, obviously, with the capacitor from 77. So it doesn't have a fuse mounted on the board, but remember that voltage is still fused on the rectifier board that we just messed with. So these two, this board and that board, kind of work together to get all of the voltages doing their thing. There is another voltage regulator, I believe, on the sound board too, though. So Why they spread everything out all over the place, I do not completely understand, but it's just how they designed it, and so we're running with it. I'll pop it back in the game. We'll see if it still boots up, and then we'll see what the voltage is on the displays. Board is booted back up. We're going to test the voltage on those 2 test points very carefully. You can take this shield off if you want, but I like to leave it on because you get some high voltages back there. Interesting. It's at 167, so it's been turned down a little bit. And the voltage coming in is 244. So, but you know, I was messing with it. Remember, I turned it a little bit. So I must have turned it down. So I'm going to turn that up to 275. I'm sorry, 175. Just so that it's nice and steady. Let's see if it helped the displays any at all. Not at all, but if you look, this one is, it looks like it's flickering a little bit in the camera, but that's just because it's catching the refresh. My naked eye here, I can't see it flickering at all. It is rock steady, baby. So if there was a problem with the power supply, the filtering of the power supply, none of them would be right, you know. So this one looks really good. These 2 here also look good. But I believe we figured out whenever we did the test that they kind of get their signal from a different place through maybe the lamp board or something. But the I guess they would get their power from the same place. So there must not be a problem with the power, or those wouldn't be looking so good. But over here we still have the same issue. The first one's flickering a little bit. The 4th one's really flickering. The 2nd and the 3rd ones aren't doing anything. So baby steps, baby steps. So I'll turn that back up just slightly to 175, and then we'll, I guess we're going to move on to working on the displays, working on the MPU, working on the lamp board, working on the sound board. Then we're going to work on the playfield. So we still got plenty of work to do, but at least now we know that the power supply area is nice and solid. Who would have thunk, though, that it already was? But now we know it is, and it should last for quite a while. The most important thing that we've done, resolder the connections and replace that 5-volt filter capacitor. If you don't get to do anything else, do that. By the way, let's see if we can check the voltage on that. Maybe that'll give us an idea. 5.27. Our buddy Ken Layton replies down below. He's on KLOV a lot, and he replies in the comments sometimes. He has time to watch the videos. He mentioned that on the last one we did like that. He said, "Did you test the 5 volts after you replaced the filter capacitor?" And that's a good point. You should check it afterwards too, just to make sure that it's not way out of spec. But so it's 5.27 here. It'll get over to the board and probably be a little less. I guess we could test that too. As of right now, it's 5.22 if I'm using this ground. So yeah, power supply is good now. I'll adjust that up and on to the next board, which will be the MPU, cleaning it up a little bit and taking care of that battery. Okay, folks, I wanted to show you a couple things. I got a couple Christmas presents here from our valuable viewers. So, our buddy Neil sent us this ruler. Now, why would he do that? It's because he was thinking that I may be able to use it to help me whenever I'm doing lines on the playfield and there's like an arc or something. Because this particular ruler you can bend and it stays in place, which is a pretty cool design. I've never seen one like that. So he was saying that might help draw some of the stuff on the playfield. That's a pretty good idea, Neil. Thank you, buddy. We appreciate it. Stadler. I've never seen one of these. But we may be able to put that to use. Thank you, Neil. You the man. And then also, so we always show off our buddies down the street. Mings, how do you say it? Got to ask our British people how you pronounce that. Minges Printing Company. I haven't seen him lately. I'm going to ask him how he pronounces his last name when I see him. They always bring us these little scratch pads so that we can write down our notes whenever we're working on the machines. So this one, I guess, let's see, extra, what's it say? Extra advanced when lit. Oh, this is when I was working on the Jubilee. Ball 2 skipped for the first player. Permanently have a free ball. Left pop. Blah, 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 right? So we use it to write stuff down. So one of our viewers, Mr. Kludge, I think it's Kludge, sent us this. We now have competing scratch pads, so people need to vote. Should we keep using this one? Or should we use this one? Or should we use a combination of both? So he sent us this little note. It says, Ron, artist conception, since we've never seen you. Love the channel, Merry Christmas. So he comments frequently, and here's what's so special about it, right? Stuff we got to do, but he drew this little caricature up on the top. So there's me. There's a light bulb falling out behind me, I think. Some little trash pieces. You see the cord hanging out the front there. More junk laying on the ground. You can see this little cog. Sometimes you have these cogs. Look, there's another wire. That's probably my soldering iron. This looks like it might be a sock. Right? And here's my multimeter. Only fluke. That's all I ever use, fluke. Look, there's another plug. Oh, these are Jones plugs. That's what it is. And then there's electricity back here to make it scary. This kind of looks like a combination of the Stars pinball machine and a Simpsons one. That kind of looks like Lisa there, I think. And then there's the play field up. And you can see all the machinations inside. It looks like there might be an engine in there. That looks like the riser pipe on the carburetor or something. There's another cog flying out. And I've got my handy screwdriver there. This is it right here. Right? And then there's an artist rendering of me. And you know, that is close. I do kind of look like that, but I look like a cross between this and George Clooney. So I'm kind of like, you know, in between that. So that's pretty cool, Mr. Kludge, Mr. Kluge. We appreciate it very much. We will use these, and we'll save this one. But yeah, we appreciate that. That's pretty cool. Now we have personalized scratch pads. And we also still have, I'm not going to retire this one fully, I don't think, though, unless y'all think I should. Because these are our buddies, too. So we'll just have to use both. This will be the one, maybe this will be stuff to order and stuff we got to do will be this one. So thank you to everybody that's been sending us little stuff like that. That's pretty cool. We appreciate that. And we'll put it to good use. So that is today's video. Leave your comments below. We got the power supply working good. Now we're on to the MPU. Some of that flickering on the displays may be a bad connection at the MPU. So you might think, oh, come on, Ron. Why didn't you take the display that don't work out, work on it, and put it back? Because I don't like doing it like that. The guy wants the whole thing looked over, right? So I'm looking over the whole thing. I'm starting at the beginning and working through. Now it can be very tempting to just grab one of those displays and just work on it, because if you resolder the connection, that might fix it, right? But now I'm sitting in a position where I know the power supply is good. I know the solenoid driver board is good. I know the display voltage on the solenoid driver board is good. You know, we're working through it. I know the connections are all good, right? So I'm standing on a really solid foundation now on that game, and we'll get it where that thing is rock steady, baby. Rock steady. I'm trying to incorporate the titles of cool R&B songs into my everyday lingo. So today's phrase is rock steady. So we're going to get it rock steady, baby. So join us next time when we will work on the MPU. So leave your comments below. Let us know what you think. Give us a thumbs up for taking the trouble to film it for you. Yeah, what a way to go, buddy. And we'd like to thank everybody that's been using our Amazon links to order stuff on Amazon. For you, not for us, but we thank people that order stuff for us too. But if you don't know about that, there's a link down below. You can click it. It takes you to Amazon. If you buy anything while you're on Amazon, it gives us a little royalty for sending you there. So we appreciate everybody that's been doing that. Somebody was on there earlier. We have somebody that keeps buying carburetors and stuff for small engine stuff. So we appreciate whoever that is. They're a complete mystery so far. But we see you out there. We see what you're doing. Somebody's working on a lot of lawnmowers, small engine stuff. So that's really cool. And so we appreciate that. And also check out my brother Donnie. If you think we're crazy, you ain't seen crazy yet. So my brother Donnie, who is literally my brother, has his own channel called My Brother Donnie. And he's always into something. So, latest video that he did, I don't know if it's up yet, but you can go check it out. So he goes to his farm, he has a little farm, and he's, there's a new baby cow. And so he's checking out the new baby cow, filming it. He calls the other cow by name, and the damn cow comes walking towards him. I don't know how you do that. How do you train a cow to answer its own name, but whatever. And then he gets ready to leave, and as he's driving down the dirt road, there's a pig walking up the road. Now, he doesn't have any pigs. Nobody around there that we thought of had any pigs. There's a pig walking up the road with 6 baby pigs behind it. I believe they call those piglets. And so, as he's walking up the road, the pig, Donnie's driving towards it with the truck. The pig just like gets over to the side of the road, and they all follow single file, as if like, oh, hello there, neighbor. Let us get out of the way while you drive past. The pig knew to get out of the way of the truck. So then Dottie's watching them, and they run up into up the hill into his farm, and he has to get out of the truck to go chase off the wild pig. And it's not, I don't mean it's like a wild boar or something. It's like a oink oink Porky the Pig, regular pig with little piglets, right? So if you like videos like that, you might want to go check out my brother Donnie. And he and I have bought this little building that used to be an old grocery store in Jefferson, South Carolina. Downtown, beautiful, downtown, historic Jefferson, South Carolina. The jewel of Chesterfield County. Except for Ruby in Chesterfield County, which would probably really be the jewel of Chesterfield County. But I'm trying to talk up the town here, right? So we bought this little building, and we're fixing it up. And then we're going to rent it to somebody. And rumor is they may have already rented it, but we're still putting up the videos of us working on it. So go check that out. I'm over there with them on that a lot. So if you haven't seen that, you may enjoy it. But we'll see you on the next video. Check out my brother Donnie. Thank you to everybody that's using our Amazon links. And on to working on the MPU. Hope y'all enjoyed it.